There is a mechanism inside you that you did not install, that you do not control, and that has been running in the background of every human interaction your species has ever had. It is the reason you feel bad when you lie to someone's face. 200,000 years ago, in a small band of hominids on an East African plain, the ones who felt bad about lying to the people they depended on survived at a slightly higher rate than the ones who did not. The ones who felt bad got reciprocity. The ones who did not feel bad got cast out. And in the ancestral environment, casting out was a death sentence. Over enough generations, the feeling bad circuit was wired into the default specification of the human nervous system. It is called conscience. And it does not work on screens. This is not a metaphor. This is the literal engineering reality of the thing we are up against. Conscience runs on facial feedback. It runs on the micro-tremor in the other person's lip when you disappoint them. It runs on the second their eyes go flat. It runs on the drop in the room's temperature when you say the thing that hurts. The human conscience was never a free-floating moral module. It was always a signal processing system that took inputs from the face and body of the person in front of you, scored those inputs against a library of past harm, and produced a sensation that kept you in line with the tribe you needed to survive. Guilt, shame, the urge to repair. Remove the face, remove the body. Replace them with a gray box and 3 dots that appear and disappear. What happens? The inputs stop arriving. The scoring mechanism has nothing to score. The sensation does not generate. And the behavior whose entire cost structure was built on the generation of that sensation, becomes free. She ghosts you. She does not feel guilty. The neurological hardware that would have produced guilt in her great-grandmother never activates in her. The screen is doing exactly what it was engineered to do, which is remove the feedback that would have caused the hardware to fire. When a woman refuses a man to his face in a village of 200 people, she sees his expression change. She sees his friend later that week, and the friend gives her a slightly colder look. She passes his mother at the well, and the mother does not smile. The cost of her refusal is visible to her. It shows up on every human face she encounters for the next several weeks. Her nervous system processes this distributed signal and produces a dampening effect on future cruelty. Next time she refuses a man, she does it more gently. Over time, her behavior converges on the small set of responses that minimize the visible cost to her social world. This convergence is what we call kindness. Kindness is not a virtue. Kindness is the crystallized record of 1,000 winces she saw on other people's faces and absorbed back into her behavior. The screen short-circuits every piece of this. She swipes left. He does not see her face. She does not see his face. His friends will never know. His mother will never know. She will never pass him at the well because there is no well. There is an app, and the app shuffles him out of her field of view the instant she decides he is not of interest.
Next.
The cost to her, measured in the only currency her conscience can read, is 0. The behavior that would have been tempered by cost in any previous era is now unmoored. It proliferates. It becomes the default. The left swipe becomes as thoughtless as scrolling past a tweet because it is scrolling past a tweet. 2 different women are running inside her. One is the ancestral human woman calibrated for face-to-face attachment. One is the screen-mediated woman, calibrated for dopamine optimization. The medium determines which one you are talking to. When she makes a decision through glass, she does not witness the consequence of the decision. Over thousands of such decisions, she builds an identity as someone who is kind because she has never once felt unkind. She genuinely believes she is a good person. She is not lying when she says so. The architecture of her self-perception has been surgically separated from the actual effects of her behavior. She is, in the relevant sense, operating in a moral vacuum. And your pain is, to her nervous system, sincerely and structurally invisible. And this is where the essay turns. The conscience that no longer registers her swipe is the same conscience that no longer registers anything that travels through a screen. And most of what happens to a modern human now happens through a screen. The question is bigger than dating. The question is, what is happening to the species as a whole when its primary moral feedback channel has been quietly disconnected? And almost no one in any field of study has yet built the language to describe it. 6 conjectures. 1. The moral residue problem. When a person is cruel to another person in physical proximity, the cruelty deposits somewhere. It leaves a trace in the cruel one's body, a knot in the stomach, a flush at the face, a shortness of sleep. It leaves a trace in the air of the social world, the friend who saw it, the parent who heard about it. These traces are how the species used to metabolize moral debt. Remove the proximity. The cruelty no longer deposits. It does not vanish. Energy in the human nervous system never vanishes. It sublimates, drifts into a layer the conscious mind cannot read, accumulates there in slow underground reserves of moral waste. They produce the strange existential dread of being slightly bad without knowing why. They produce the depression that has no stated cause. The moral waste is not landing on the people they harmed. It is collecting inside themselves. And they are getting sick from it without knowing what is making them sick. 2. The death of the witness. An act in human ontology has always required a witness to be real. The murder in the woods that no one heard is, in the legal and moral imagination of every pre-modern culture, a different kind of murder than the murder in the village square. Not because it was a smaller crime, because the victim's death was less registered in the social fabric. The witness is the registration mechanism. The witness is what converts an action into a fact other minds will hold. The screen abolishes the witness. When you ghost a man through an app, no one is in the room with you when you do it. The act has no witnesses on your side of the glass. And the act, accordingly, has the ontological status of a thought rather than an event. You can credibly deny it to yourself because there is no one in your reality whose memory contains it. The screen has invented a category of action that did not exist in the ancestral environment: the unwitnessed deed. 3. The flattening of distance. In every culture before screens, distance had a texture. There was the stranger across the fire, close enough to see his face, far enough not to know his name. There was the kin in the next valley, known but accessible only by a day's walk. There was the trader from 3 weeks' walk away, a person with a different god, a different season, a different way of holding a knife. The gradient of proximity was thick. Social trust, intimacy, attachment, romantic interest, all of them were calibrated against a richly textured field of distance. The screen collapses every distance into one distance. Whether you are texting your wife in the next room, your mother in another state, or a man in Singapore you have never met, The medium is identical. Glass at 12 inches. Latency under a second. The human nervous system, which evolved to use proximity gradients to assign relational weight, can no longer locate where a relationship is. Everyone is the same distance. And a creature whose attachment system was built on spatial nuance, when fed only spatial flatness, behaves as if no one is anywhere. 4. The phone as the atheist's idol. Every culture before this one had household gods, small altars, ancestor figures, candles tended at the same hour every evening, objects whose careful tending organized the day and reminded the tender that there was a hierarchy of attention older than the self. The secular project of the last 200 years has been, on paper, the dismantling of these objects. On paper, we have no idols. In practice, we have reinstalled the same psychological infrastructure under a different name. The phone is the atheist's idol. It sleeps next to the bed. It is the first object touched in the morning and the last touched at night. It is consulted before any major decision. It is feared when lost. Its utterances, notifications, are received with an attention more reverent than the attention any modern subject gives to a priest. The lares of a Roman household pointed back to the family lineage that worshipped them. The phone points outward, into a network of strangers and brands and algorithms, none of whom owe the worshiper anything. It is the household god of the unhoused self. 5. The reverse Turing test. For 50 years, the dominant philosophical question of computation was whether a machine could pass for a human. We forgot to ask the inverse question. The screen has been quietly running the reverse Turing test on the species for 2 decades. And the species has been passing as machines. We have learned to interact with each other in formats designed for chatbots. Short, optimized, reactive, emotionally low bandwidth, predictable, swipeable. Our messaging cadences match the cadences of the autoresponder. Our self-presentations match the schemas of a profile. We got there first by imitating the medium. The convergence between humans and machines is happening, but from the wrong direction. AI will eventually replace us not because it became indistinguishable from us, but because we became indistinguishable from it. And the substitution will be cheap. 6. The metaphysical loneliness. The depression epidemic is not psychological, it is structural. The conscience mechanism whose silencing under glass we described was not a luxury feature of the human nervous system. It was one of the primary feedback channels by which a human verified that other consciousnesses existed and registered the human's existence in return. The conscience firing was, among other things, the felt evidence of being seen by another mind. When the conscience does not fire, the human nervous system silently records, "No other mind is registering me." Over thousands of such interactions, the recording accumulates into a baseline state. The baseline state is the felt sense of being alone in a sealed simulation. The depression that the DSM calls dysthymia, the philosophers call ennui, and the existentialists called nausea, is the species' direct experience of having had its empathy receptors silenced, at scale, as a default condition of life. We are very social. We are lonely in the metaphysical sense, which is older and harder to name, and which is the felt sense of having no other mind to read. Every ethical system from the Decalogue to Kant to Mill presupposed a relational nervous system. Embodied humans in proximity to other embodied humans whose actions had legible consequences and whose conscience was wired to those consequences. Those foundations have been removed. The philosophy continues to be taught, written, debated, and applied. But it is now a vestigial discipline, like surgery without anesthesia. The substrate it required to function has been quietly turned off. The next ethics, when it eventually comes, will not look like the ethics we have. It will look like infrastructure, protocols for restoring proximity, regulations on screen-mediated cruelty, ritualized in-person encounters that the species reinstalls as a deliberate counter-architecture. The people who build it will be doing what every architect does in the wreckage of a forgotten cathedral: measuring, drawing, reconstructing what their ancestors took for granted because their ancestors did not have to design it. We are at the very beginning of that work. Most of us have not yet realized it has begun.